Welcome back to Ignite&Scale, the podcast where we explore the journeys of founders, investors, and industry disruptors who are reshaping the world of entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm your host, Mike Allen, and today we're joined by a fantastic guest, Jeff Barnes. Jeff is the CEO of Angel Investors Network and the fund manager for Angels and Hero Venture Growth Fund. He's also the creator and host of the highly acclaimed Angels, Exits and Acquisitions podcasts, where he interviews some of the top 1% of entrepreneurs, investors, venture capitalists, and private equity leaders. Suppose you want to gain the edge on raising capital, creating wealth through strategic investments, or scaling a business to achieve a successful exit. In that case, Jeff's podcast is an absolute must. I know this firsthand as I've had the privilege of being a guest on his show and have become an avid follower of the incredible insights he shares. Today, we're diving into Jeff's journey as a podcast host, exploring his most significant learnings from his conversations during 2024 and gaining his perspective on what lies ahead in 2025 in entrepreneurship and private investing. Jeff, it's great to have you on Ignite&Scale. Can you tell us what inspired you to create Angels, Exits and Acquisitions and what you hope to achieve with your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me here, Mike. Well, we did this for a few different reasons, right? I run the company Angel Investors Network, and so we're always looking at investing and finding deals and deal flow. So the podcast became, one, a lead generation mechanism for us to bring in great companies and investors into our deals and into our ecosystem. But it's also to educate people that are out there that might be wondering about what does it take to be successful when raising capital or scaling a business and exiting a business or investing in a business, right? There's so many different nuances to all of this. And it seems like everybody has a different idea or opinion around that. So again, it was an education tool that helps to bring people into our ecosystem and eventually maybe become a client or come to one of our events.
What's your favorite part about hosting the podcast and connecting with so many inspiring individuals I've heard on your podcast as well? What's your favorite part?
I mean, my favorite part is that you get all these different people from so many different backgrounds, so many different ideas. They're all very innovative, very successful people, and it's getting to the core of really what made them successful, what kind of makes them tick. And the thing that I find really interesting is that it's almost always the same, although there's a different way that everybody else finds out about this, right? There's a reason that these people become successful, and it's almost always the same reason, which I can go into that if you'd like me to, but it's their story about how they figured that out, right? Which is really fun.
Fascinating, and I mean, you've had the opportunity to speak to some incredible guests in 2024. What would be some of your standout moments or biggest lessons from those conversations? Perhaps go deeper into why people become successful and what the best kind of standout podcasts have been for you this year.
Yeah, I think the thing that I love the most about this is that we're living in an age and society in these days when we talk about entitlement a lot, and there are certain people out there that feel very entitled because they've grown up in let's face it, the 21st century, as bad as things might be for some people, the standard and quality of life is better than it's ever been throughout human history. Like we have to acknowledge that. But unfortunately, that breeds a certain type of laziness in a lot of people. And the thing that I loved about interviewing all these folks on my podcast is that they buck that trend. They say, no, I'm not going to be lazy. I'm not going to sit back and wait for things to come to me. I am going to go out there and carve my own path and figure it all out. And I really, really, really want to work hard. It's not that they have to work hard. I mean, they don't, everybody can just sit back and go get a normal 9 to 5 job and, be okay in life. But they want to work hard because they want a certain level of success and they're willing to do anything it takes to get there. And that's one of the things I really love about interviewing people is that, we talk about, these overnight successes. I put that in air quotes for anybody who may not see that, is that these overnight successes take 20 years or more to create. And no one sees that 20 years. They just see them showing up on the scene as somebody who's exited a business or, made an incredible appearance on some magic TV show or, podcast. They showed up on Joe Rogan, for example, and no one knew who they were before that, but all of a sudden they're an overnight success. And I get to interview people about the journey that gets them there, and it's pretty great.
Yeah. And in terms of the kind of variety of clients that you've had, is it worth kind of going into, I mean, clearly a lot of them are involved in early stage businesses, but just are they typically in the US? Are they overseas? What types are they? Is it tech enabled businesses? How would you describe the diversity of people you've had on your podcast?
Yeah, I'd say 90% are US based, and we have a good mix of folks in Europe for the most part that come on the podcast. And a lot of the times they are tech founders. I've had people from Australia on the podcast, and New Zealand, and Africa, and Europe, and all over the world. It's been great. It's one of the magics of technology now, getting the chance to interview like you and I are completely different time zones across a vast geography and an ocean in between us. And it's a lot of fun to be able to have those different conversations and different perspectives. But at the core of it, everybody still has this humanistic drive, this nature behind them. And a lot of them are they're tech founders, but not all of them. We actually have a lot of folks that have been very successful in our ecosystem who were small business owners, right? They owned auto shops or auto dealerships, as an example, and they've turned that auto dealership into the next one, and the next one. And eventually, they had a portfolio, and they were able to exit out of that and make a massive windfall. I had one gentleman who had a nine-figure exit owning pet stores, as an example. So, it's all over the board, and people think that you have to have this really incredible newfangled idea and high-tech innovative product or idea to be successful anymore. And that's not the case. In fact, we've had some folks that have just they did the thing that I started in my career, which I absolutely hated. Wish I would have maybe stuck with it, but it was really boring for me, which was selling life insurance. And we have people that built up massive businesses selling life insurance, right? And so we've had some really incredible guests on there. And then on the flip side, we have a number of VCs and private equity investors and private credit providers and hedge fund folks that have invested in companies. And so they manage other people's money. And so you get to hear the mindset of both sides of taking other people's money and being a fiduciary and scaling up their business and managing other people's money as a fiduciary to make wise decisions.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's been buy and builds as well across different sectors, and that always fascinates me. And I know when I came onto your show, we kind of discussed that. But I think what's great about your podcast is you're testing these theories across lots of different countries, and you come back to the same core central idea in that these are extraordinary people wanting to push the boundaries and do it in different ways, but get there, and that's what keeps me wrapped to your podcast. So that's great. I mean, just looking ahead, what's your outlook for 2025? What are there any kind of trends or opportunities that you see in early stage investing, acquisitions, or exits that you might see might play out a bit more next year?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of fun trends that are happening. Capital has been sitting on the sidelines for a while. We just had a massive election here in the United States, and that's changing sentiment for investors and fund managers of different types. And I do foresee a lot of changes. Of course, no one knows for sure what the future holds and what the administration might do that might change certain policies. But some of the things that have been kind of tossed out there as ideas could have massive implications on what people do with their money, what people do with their businesses, how they scale their businesses, right? We've been talking about globalization for the last 20 plus years now. Well, if things change where globalization becomes cost prohibitive for a company to scale, we might see people retract and say, okay, we're not going to send all of our workforce overseas or our money to, VAs overseas, and we might have to change some of that model. We might have to change where the manufacturing happens. There might be opportunities in the real estate sector for us to revive American real estate in certain areas because manufacturing might need to be resourced back to the United States. So there's a lot of things that we might see happening there. Now, of course, this is all speculation. We have no idea at this point. But from a capital perspective, I can tell you that people are saying right now, constantly, I do not want to miss out on the next bull run, whatever that is. And a lot of folks are looking actively, not necessarily at startups. Startups are still very skeptical for a lot of people. They don't know if they're ever going to get their money back. So they might, it's more like a gamble. Like, let's be honest, startup investing is still a gamble for a lot of people. So they might put 5%, 10% of their overall investable assets into a startup, but not much more. And we never suggest much more, but they will look at alternatives such as different commodities. There's, the Forex markets are crazy right now. People are trading. The crypto markets are crazy. There's things happening there, as well as, of course, small business acquisitions. We're in the midst of the largest global wealth transfer that's ever happened in human history, may ever see again, given the trends that we're seeing in population growth. And as a result, there's opportunities for people to go buy businesses right now. We're actually actively involved in contract negotiations to buy several eight-figure businesses on our end. And so I see that as being a really big trend for people to acquire existing profitable cash flowing businesses without having to go through the headache of starting something from the ground up. So I see those as some really big trends.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I guess, you've always talked about the importance of strategic partnerships, leveraging networks. I mean, given some of these huge kind of generational wealth trends that we're seeing, I guess they've never been more important as we go into next year and this wealth transfer takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, paying attention to what's happening around us is really important. And most people are dogmatic about their focus on just getting through a day, right? Whereas the successful people are very open-minded. They take off all their blinders and they're willing to look at what the trends are going to be for the next 5, 10, 20 years and jump on those. And the big trend that we're seeing right now is the small and mid-sized businesses that are out there are going to need to change hands. And somebody needs to step in and be the operator of those companies. And that's a really big change that we're seeing. It's been going on for a few years now, but people are really starting to catch on to this and realize that there is a way to invest in private asset classes, private, businesses, alternative asset classes without taking on a massive amount of risk as well.
No, fascinating. And what would be the single piece of advice that you'd offer our kind of audience of entrepreneurs and investors looking to navigate these worlds of angels, exits, acquisitions more effectively next year? What would be the one key piece of advice you'd give?
Focus. Um, Focus on one thing. It's been the bane of my existence, to be quite honest. Because of the business that I'm in, we literally get pitched opportunities every single day. And they're really fun and they're attractive and you want to help all these people out and you want to go after all these different opportunities. But the fact is, we all only have a certain amount of time and bandwidth and brain power that we can work with. Some maybe more brain power than others. But regardless, there's an energy shift that happens whenever you take your focus off of the main thing, right? And as soon as you say, okay, well, this sounds really cool, and I'm going to go try this strategy or this tactic, or maybe I'll take advantage of this little thing that's coming out, and you move from your core focus of what your long-term goal is to something else that you think is going to help out in the short term, it ends up becoming a really big problem. And you lose energy and it doesn't work out, and then you have to navigate back to the main path. And this is really challenging for a lot of people. So I've come up with an acronym for the word focus, which is a fixed obsession culminating in unbelievable success. So you have to have a fixed obsession on the one thing that you want to achieve. And if you are focused 100% on that, then it's really easy to say no to everything else. And I think that's the number one thing that I would suggest people do is really focus on what is that one thing you want to achieve in the next 12 months.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And finally, Jeff, what's next for Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions? How do you see your podcast growing and evolving in 2025?
It's funny you asked that because I was actually working on that this morning, even before I jumped on here, which is, what do we really want to be known for? And what we don't want is just to be noise out there, and hopefully people find us. And so we're really narrowing in on our niche. And again, going back to focus, like, what do I really want to get out of this? Well, for people that have seen any of these really big podcasts that have exploded over the last decade or even less, like Patrick Bet David, and you have Joe Rogan, and you have Jason Calacanis, and all these folks have gotten really good at really again that one thing. And so for us, that one thing is how do we support 8 and 9 figure business owners and executives in building long-term wealth, right? And the reason I say that, it might sound really strange when you talk about angel investing. Well, what is angel investing? It's a way to invest in something that other people don't have access to and hopefully build wealth and make an impact and leave a legacy and all these different things. So we're really focusing in on how do we support these existing business owners who are maybe later in their career these people don't want to retire. And how do we support them with taking that next leap, which is maybe exiting their business, maybe investing in the next thing, maybe acquiring other businesses to bolt on, and so on. So that's really what our core focus is.
Yeah, no, that's great. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. The insights you've shared from your podcast journey to your perspective on the evolving landscape has been invaluable. And for our listeners, please do check out Jeff's Angels, Exits and Acquisitions podcast. There'll be more details in the show notes as well. But finally, Jeff, I mean, what's the best way to get hold of you if people are interested in the podcast or interacting with what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Mike. And thanks again so much for having me here. The easiest way is to go to angelnetwork.com. That's our website, angelnetwork.com. And then, of course, Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions is on all the different podcast channels and YouTube. So you can actually watch the podcast on YouTube. And I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way for people to get in touch with me. And if you go to angelnetwork.com, you'll be able to find my LinkedIn there as well.
That's great. Well, Jeff, thanks very much.
Mike, thanks so much for having me here.
If you want to listen to more episodes of the podcast, we're on all good audio platforms. Our website is also www.cambriaprivatecapital.com, and you can also find myself on LinkedIn and Twitter, where we publish our weekly blogs as well. Please do get in touch if you want more information.